Okay, welcome back to another of the Sunday afternoon opening day clinics for Gateway X, the NMRA X virtual convention. Our This is the last clinic before the panel discussion coming up at 5 o'clock Eastern time, and right now Dan Munson is going to talk to us about some model railroad photography. Dan is yet another one of these railroaders who's also interested in model railroading for some reason. We seem to find a lot of railroaders into the hobby. But Dan's been a railroader for 24 years, working both union and management positions. Prior to that, he spent time as a firefighter and flight attendant. So I'm kind of worried he can't hold a job. Author and photographer, has photos and stories published in about every model railroad magazine and railroad magazine. Lifelong rail fan and model railroader. Married with 3 children, and he's working on an operations-based railroad, which will be his second. So, Dan, if you're ready to go, you can get your screen sharing going, and we will listen to your presentation on model railroad photography.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Glad I'm here. Let me try to get going here. Are you able to see that screen all right?
That's perfect.
Excellent. Okay. All right, so let's get started. These are more thoughts and tips about model railroad photography based on a lot of my experiences. Based on my past careers in the airline industry, firefighting, and now with the railroad, safety is a big deal. We're not all together in one room, so I really don't have to worry about this. The only thing I'd like to emphasize toward the bottom here, it says to ask questions. I'm not going to be shy, so I hope that you won't be as well. And I hope that we all can learn something and have a little fun. So let's start off with a beautiful view of Mike Borcon's Union Pacific Railroad. This is a shot I took on his railroad, just doing some experimenting with some photography. We'll see some more images of his railroad as we go through the presentation. I already talked a little bit about me, flight attendant for Piedmont, TWA, and US Air many, many years ago. EMT and firefighter prior to that, then hired on with BNSF in 1997 as a conductor. Became a yardmaster 2000, train master 2001, division train master in 2004. Went to manager of trackage rights in Omaha in 2005. Terminal manager in Omaha 2007. Became superintendent of operations out in Gillette, Wyoming from 2012 to 2016. I'm now back as a yardmaster here in Kansas City, working regular hours, not having to worry about answering a cell phone. So life is pretty good. I'm a lifelong railroad buff, model railroader, and railroad photographer. That's me on a special surprise birthday session they sent up for me on Paul DeLuca's great New York Central Railroad. I'm qualified on the Mini-Mac from 2008 till present. A lot of people don't know that. And that's actually a little Cushman cart that was built by an engineer out of Newcastle, Wyoming. It's got a little coal car behind it. We pull that around at different family events. It's a pretty good deal. Kids really love it. And then there's a shot of me standing in the floodwaters of Omaha Gibson Yard 2011. 7.9 inches of rain fell in a couple hours, and the water had nowhere to go because everything was closed off because of the flooding of 2011. So enough about me. Let's talk a little bit more about just some photography that I've done in the past. I've been blessed to be able to have photographs on the in and on the most major model railroad publications, as well as railroad publications. An example of the NMRA magazine on Steve Priest's railroad on the left-hand side, cover of Model Railroad Craftsman with John Percy's beautiful Baltimore and Pacific Railroad, phenomenal railroad. Just a couple other shots here, RMC with the B&O and trains with a shot I did of Mike Haverty. Great story behind that. Probably don't have time for it today, but bottom line is I asked him to, if I brought a white towel and asked him if he would pretend like he's cleaning the locomotive, and he obliged for the cover shot of trains. So if you've been taking photographs since before 1999, you know there's obviously been some great improvements in photography that will allow you to be a lot more creative. You no longer need a macro lens. Digital images have replaced slides. For those of you that have had slides, shot those in past, You didn't know what you got until you got the images back, and sometimes that was a couple of weeks. We'll talk a little bit about Helicon Focus, which allows you to smash all your images together to have perfect depth of field all the way through. We'll talk a little bit about Photoshop and Lightroom to make some changes. Not going to get too much into detail on that. We're going to talk about how to shoot them, preparing for the shot, setting up the lighting and the white balance, and Helicon Focus. Those are going to be the main areas we're going to touch on here this afternoon in this presentation. So, how do you shoot them? Well, you shoot them like the prototype. There's inspiration everywhere. There's books, there's internet, there's friends. There's the Center for Railroad Photography, which is a great organization that is keeping several just some beautiful photography work all together. So here's an example of just some inspirational work. This is on the former Rock Island in western Kansas after the Southern Pacific took over the operations of what they call the Golden State Route. A couple of trains meeting out west. The train coming at us is now what is their Blue Streak Manifest, which was then routed over the Rock Island, meet another train the siding. It's a prototypical shot, but use it as inspiration to photograph your model railroads. Photograph it just like you would the prototype. Again, lots of inspiration out there. I'm sure a lot of you have got great book collections. You can see just great inspirational work in through here. A lot of these books and photographers I grew up with, Joe McMillan, Doran, a lot of those different books just really inspired me to take better railroad photographs, which has helped me make, I hope, what I believe are better model railroad photographs. So shoot them like the prototype. Here's a prime example. Short line out in Arizona, shot off a hill, coming around the curve. Shot on the right, B&O train. You know, they're very similar. That was exactly what I was going for when I took both of these photographs, trying to similar views and inspired by the prototype on the left. Here's another great examples with apologies to Don Sims and Mike Borkon and the UP Historical Society. On the lower bottom there is a photograph of Don Sims that appeared in the UP Historical magazine of Green River, Wyoming. And the image above is a photograph of Mike Borkon's Union Pacific HO scale railroad, you know, showing that the similar view off of the pedestrian walkway that is there still to this day in Green River, Wyoming, where you can get some great photographs off of the top of. So think about what kind of shots you would take of the prototype in that specific area you're modeling. So for example, you know, if you have a steam railroad you're photographing, you wouldn't use a lot of telephoto shots because telephotos really weren't as common back during the steam era. You know, that'd be more later on in years. Maybe more of a black and white style because you're photographing steam or steam diesel transition. You know, drones are fairly recent. If you're modeling a modern railroad, you can take a lot of pictures from above. Otherwise, photograph them from ground level. As a tendency, we seem to see a lot of photographs shot over and above, kind of giving you an overall view of the railroad. That is great for those kind of views, but to get more dramatic, more inspired photographs, get down to ground level on your model railroad. Take photographs like you would on the 1-for-1 scale. Here's an example on Chuck Hitchcock's a former railroad, the Argentine District. Again, down low, down at about the level where these figures and buildings are at. Another example, Doug Taylor's Pennsylvania Railroad. Beautiful, beautiful old school operating model railroad. Lots of opportunity for photography on this one. And again, I'm down at ground level where you would photograph the prototype. Another couple of views there on Doug Taylor's, and on the B&O down there on the bottom right. Okay, if you're gonna shoot up high, justify it. Okay, so am I photographing from a bridge? Am I photographing from an elevator? Kansas City Southern there, that we're shooting off a bridge in Omaha, a KCS haulage rights grain train going up the BNSF heading toward Lincoln. On the right, could we be up on a cliff, up on a high hill, or maybe even off another bridge, photographing on David Doreen's Southern Pacific, another beautiful model railroad. Are we on top of a building as we're looking down the street operations in Fort Dodge on Mike Porter's HO scale railroad? Could be. A lot of big buildings around there. I could be on top of one. Again, make it work, justify it. Am I photographing off a cliff? Am I off a tree? Maybe I'm even on a signal bridge here on Doug Taylor's Horseshoe Curve. GTS to the max. And that's a phrase that my friends and I use for a lot of years. It stands for get the shot. So every time, every photograph, do everything you can to create a beautiful image. Create an image that will not require a lot of manipulation. What does that mean? That means set, create every shot, so it needs the smallest amount of touch-up, color correction, cleanup, or cropping. So when you frame your photograph, frame it as best you possibly can so that you don't have to do much cropping. Set it up, your lighting, so you don't have to do any modifications in Photoshop or Lightroom. Does your photograph tell a story? This is a great advice that I got from Blair Queester many years ago. Take a photograph that tells a story. Does the photograph tell a story? To me, it does, and be able to tell the story. Here's an example of a hotshot Milwaukee Road Auto Parts and auto rack train coming in Kansas City in the middle of winter. Clear day, but it had been fighting drifts all the way down across Iowa and northern Missouri, and that can be plainly seen by the snow on top of the locomotive. And it's so high priority, it's running around another train sitting there. This is out at the Truman Drawbridge in Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, so what do you need to be able to take great photographs nowadays? You need a digital SLR with a manual focus. You need to have a shutter release or a trigger release cable to use with that camera. You need a tripod or magic beans, and we'll talk a little bit more about magic beans in a bit. You need lights, and you need plenty of lights. You need a white balance filter, and we'll also talk a little about that. You need to have your subject, and you need to have your scene. So, prepping for the shot. Here are some things you want to keep nearby to use when you're prepping for the shot. You need a can of air. A lot of our equipment tends to attract dust. Digital photography nowadays will see that dust and will pick it up. You'll be able to see it in the photograph. So give everything a touch of air. Spray some air around, get the dust off the equipment, off the nose of the locomotive, off the sides of the locomotives, off the top of the cars, off the top of the buildings. A soft brush. Soft brush will work just as well to brush that same dust off the equipment. Maybe a gentle vacuum. Rather than dust it off and have to worry about it later, get a gentle vacuum and suck it up right there. So hopefully you won't have to worry about it later. Always good to have some ACC, some super glue, or whatever glue you like to use, because inevitably you'll find that locomotive that you're photographing, or the caboose, or whatever piece of equipment it is, may have a piece broken off, may have a grab iron that needs to get glued in place, or an air horn, whatever it might be. Check your scene and double check your scene. I've set up some beautiful photographs, taken the photographs, only to find out later that I didn't check the scene as well as I would like to, and I found items in the shot that I didn't want to be there. The digital photography, again, is going to bring out the details and bring out the light. It's phenomenal what it will do. So make sure that you get everything cleaned and well organized for your shot. So Here we are on Joe Atkinson's beautiful Iowa Interstate Railroad photo shoot we did for his story in the July 2018 issue of RMC. You can see me there adjusting the locomotives, bringing them just a little bit forward into the shot, into the frame with my hands. There's two schools of thoughts on this. Do you want to run the train into place for the photograph, or do you want to 050 pick it up and place it into the photograph? Couple of thoughts about this. 050, you may find that you've got cars or locomotives in the photograph that are not on the rail. And it's one of those things that has been missed before. I'm guilty of it. If you run them into place, you know that everything's on the rail. So recommendation, run it into place, and then once you're where it needs to be, you can move it back and forth just a little bit to get it in the frame the way you like it. Okay, is your subject ready? And the old makeup. Here's Mike Borkon doing a little last minute weathering on his Union Pacific mail train that we're setting up to focus focus on and do some photography that you saw earlier in there. So don't be afraid to make a few last minute changes if you want onto your equipment, adding a little bit more detail or a little bit more weathering. Here's a good example of that. Here's a before and after. You can obviously tell the big difference of the effect that the weathering has had. I think it makes a big difference and does a great job of making that scene even that much more realistic. Okay, you got to double check your subject here. So my friends in Chicago will understand the double check here. And if you've ever seen the old State Farm commercial there with the guys with the great heavy Chicago accents, you understand. I'm from Chicago, so I can, it comes a little bit more easily to me. So, all right, double check your subject. Here's a nice shot we set up on Doug Taylor's Pennsylvania Railroad. And can you find out what I missed? Well, double check your scene, double check. There's a handle from a long reach tool that got left in the way. Now I could easily crop that out, and I have easily cropped it out, but if I was trying to get more of that hillside in there, the shot would have not been as good as I wanted it to be, with obviously with the handle in the middle of it. So take the time, make the time to double check your scene. What also works out really well is to have somebody else double check it. If you've got a friend that's with you while you're taking the photographs, maybe somebody helping you adjust the lights, here's a great opportunity to have him take a look through the viewfinder or look through the scene to make sure that you didn't miss anything. Here's another example. This is Jim McCroskey's CB&Q Railroad, another great model railroad. Set him up here on this nice scene around the Forest City area on his railroad, and didn't double check. And when we got in there taking a little closer look, here's what we found. We found the grab iron was just off, hanging in the MU cables. Found a little blemish on the locomotive. If we'd taken a closer look at it sooner, we could have corrected both of those. Both of those were easy things to correct. You want to make sure that those kind of flaws are not there in your photograph. The blemish on the locomotive, we could easily take care of that in Photoshop. It's a bit tougher with the grab irons to try to get that corrected in Photoshop. It can be done if you're really talented, but it's a lot of time and effort when all it would take would be a little more careful, a little more caution, watch what you're doing, and avoiding that. Lighting and the setup. So again, I'm going to go back to how would you photograph in a prototype? Where would the sun be? Where is the sun going to be? In most cases, when you're taking a photograph outside, it's going to be at your back. You want to have your light on your subject, right? So when you're setting up to photograph your model railroad, where are those lights most likely going to be? They're most likely going to be behind you or off to an angle, a right angle or right or left side of you while you're taking your photograph. So here's a couple of Joe Atkinson's photos of us showing just a couple examples of setting up some lights to photograph his beautiful Iowa Interstate Railroad. Set up the lights and take some photographs. Adjust the lights and take some more photographs. Don't be afraid while you've got that scene set up to adjust the lighting on it. Just like out photographing the prototype. The difference is that you get to move the earth to get the sun in a better position when you're taking model photography. And do that. Drop those lights down a little bit. Don't be afraid to do that, to get some more dramatic light, to get some more dramatic shadows onto your subject. When I go out and take photographs outside of the prototype, I shoot from dusk, excuse me, I shoot from dawn till about 10:30 during the summer months, because at that point, 10:30 or so, the sun gets very high in the sky, and it's straight down light on the subject matter, which washes it out, does not make it appealing to photograph. Then I won't I will not photograph again until the afternoon. Typically, it's about 3:30 in the afternoon. I will then go out and start taking more pictures until dusk. Again, the earth is turned, the sun has come around a bit, and it's now a little bit lower, and will continue to drop lower and get more dramatic as the day continues on into sunset and dusk. Remember that when you're taking your model railroad photography, and adjust those lights accordingly. Here's just a rough idea, a real rough drawing of how to set up your lighting. The camera is the red square there. The black arrow is the train. The smaller arrows are the lights. You want to have one right on that nose. You want to have good side lighting all along, and you want to have one on that backdrop. That far away backdrop is always a challenge. What you'll find is you'll find that your lighting will drop off, and that backdrop around the corner is not as well lit as you'd like it to be. I've found in most cases I have to put a light right up against that backdrop to make sure that it is as bright as the rest of the scene. Watch your shadows on the backdrop as well. This is a challenging thing. Sometimes it can't be avoided. So say, for example, there's a structure between the train and the backdrop, a water tower, a grain elevator. Those will cast a shadow. Excuse me, depending on the angle of your photo, the angle of your lights, you may be able to adjust it out of there. I've found it takes away from the photograph in most cases if I'm trying to adjust the light to get rid of shadow in the background. Best thing to do is to, I guess it's kind of like it's give and takes with everything. Take the shadow in the background and hope that you can work with it in the Photoshop or Lightroom later on. There's an example of the scene we saw first off, and how we lit it. Ended up having 3 lights. I use a low Tata lights, and you can see I've got one all the way back there, fairly close to the curve in the backdrop, to make sure that is well lit all the way through the scene. Try different lighting. Like I said earlier, don't be afraid to move those lights around. Here's a couple example of Carl Kempkes's narrow gauge Denver and Rio Grande. I put the lights back behind, like it might be coming into a shadow of a mountain or a cloud from the sky. And then I gave it full head-on light there on the bottom right-hand side. Play with it. I was there, I was set up, I had the chance, I had the time, so I moved the lights around and came up with 2 strikingly different images. Again, always watch for your lighting in that far backdrop. You can see in both of these images, you can see how the lighting drops off fairly quickly toward the right-hand side of each of the image. Most of the lights that I use and the lights that are available will put off some heat. So limit the proximity to the model. You don't want to get too close to it. There has been some melting that's gone on in the past, and it will be an electrical draw. You may pop some breakers with some of these, depending on the house you're photographing in and the setup of the electrical system there. Don't be afraid of the dark. One of the things that is phenomenal that you can do now with digital photography is that it really does suck in the light. It really just finds it and goes after it. And with a well-detailed scene that is lit for night photography, you can create some what I feel phenomenal photographs. Here's an example of Steve Priest's former HO scale railroad, Santa Fe, Rock Island. Great night scene. Again, he had set it up for all of the with lights in the tower and along different structures on the right of way. Continue on. The setup and the shot. So here's a good example of how to set up the shot. Mike Borcon putting some finishing touches on a turbine that is in his Green River, Wyoming engine facility. And you can see the camera and the lights already set up. Notice that the camera is set up on blocks of wood and a bag of beans. You know, you can go out and buy expensive professional photographer sandbags to set your camera on to use to stabilize them in different locations. I chose to spend about $1 and bought a bag of pinto beans, threw them in a Ziploc bag, and I find that that works very, very well. Any kind of dry bean in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag, again, depending on what type of camera you're using, works really, really well. We'll talk about this in a bit when we get into more with the Helicon, but you've got to be able to keep that camera very still and use your shutter release to trigger your photographs. The bag of beans works great. Also, if I'm placing that bag right on a model railroad, it does very limited damage to the model railroad. Might bend down some static grass in a particular location, but other than that, it doesn't leave any kind of a footprint behind. So that's one of the other reasons why it works well. And I jokingly call them the magic beans because they're magic. They help create some incredible photographs simply by allowing a stable, fixed location on a model railroad to photograph. White balance. This is another one of these things that you want to do to save you time on the backside of processing, to get that color right on your first photograph the first time. So what does white balance correction do? Well, what it does is it creates a more natural light for that location. It creates a tone, a color tone throughout the whole photograph that is more natural, hopefully more based on what you expected to have by using the particular lights that you were using and making the scene look more like the prototype. I'll touch on this just briefly. You may be familiar with this, the Kelvin scale. This is what it talks about, the temperature of light. And when I go out and photograph on a beautiful sunny afternoon, you know, that beautiful blue sky is around the 9 to 10,000 Kelvin, top of the scale there. You know, crisp, clear skies, what some people might call a Kodachrome sky, you know, white puffy clouds and a beautiful blue sky. You get some haze in there, like we had the Sierra sands moving through parts of the country the other day. You know, you get down to the 8,000 or maybe even down to the 7,000. You start dealing with clouds. You start dealing with everything else. It continues to drop. You get more down toward the white side of that scale. You get down to the household bulbs and you get down to the sunsets, and you start getting down into the reds and oranges, which are the lower numbers. The lights I use, I don't know specifically what Kelvin they are, but they are down more in the red and orange area because I want that warm early morning, late afternoon effect. By simply moving it back, the lights back a little bit, I can get more into the blues, the whites and blues. Okay. White balance and its features. Most digital SLRs have a white balance feature. And if you don't, you can be corrected in Lightroom or Photoshop. But again, it's great if you can use it right off the bat with your SLR and save you having to do it on the backside. So here's a couple of examples. If you look on the upper left-hand side, you've got a neat shot of a meet on Ken Jenkins' Rock Island Railroad. There's a yellow tinge to the photograph. with the lighting in his basement, with the lights I was using, without using white balance, I got a yellow tinge. The shot below, I used white balance, and you can see everything's crisper. Everything is a little more natural coloring versus a kind of a hue of yellow that kind of permeates in the throughout the scene. Excuse me. So this is one of the things you're going to have to get with your may have to dive into your owner's manual. Maybe you already know how to use this, but most of them have an automatic white balance. I found that it really does not work for model railroad photography. You really need to use the custom feature that is available on most of your digital SLRs. Again, you need to consult your manual or possibly look at online on how to set up your custom white balance feature on your camera. When you set up the custom white balance on your camera, you need to then use a filter, and here's an example of that filter right there. This is an Expo disc. What I'll do is I set up my camera for custom white balance, and I've got my scene all set up. I've got my lights all set up. I put this filter over my lens and I take a photograph. And what it does is it creates it's obviously not a pretty image. It's just really more of a kind of a gray or a white scale. And I tell my camera with my custom white balance, I want you to photograph using this as the white balance. And you will be amazed at the difference that it makes. Encourage you to experiment with this as well. Take the time, make the time, set it up, take your photograph, look at it, take your photograph after you set your white balance using the custom feature, using one of these filters. You will see a major difference, and it's phenomenal. So just talking about that same thing right there. Set everything up, lights on, put the filter on your lens, take your photograph, set your white balance to that photograph. Now let's talk a little bit about Helicon Focus. Helicon Focus is probably one of the biggest game changers since going from film to digital in my mind. There's several of these services out there. I believe Lightroom or Photoshop has one similar. This is the one that I'm familiar with, so I'm going to talk about it and show you. It is a subscription-based service and allows you to combine photos, enhancing the depth of field. Basically smashing numerous photographs together that are taken at different focal points all the way through so that you have depth of field all the way through. So here is the what they call right from their website. It's a program for focus stacking. Program selects focused areas from multiple source images and combines them into one perfectly focused image with extended depth of field. So let's talk about what you must do to do this. You must shoot all photographs from the same, focusing through the range of photographs. So you can start at the back of the photograph, you can start at the front of the photograph, and you need to focus all the way through. You're taking multiple shots all the way through with your digital camera on a fixed base. You've got to have a fixed base. If you bump it, and that will corrupt the process of your image, because all the images aren't basically the same all the way through. Helicon Focus recommends an f-stop of f16. You can increase that if you wanted to. I find it doesn't make that much of a difference. It works well to stick with the recommendations that they did. What is your shutter speed? You don't have to have, there's no fixed shutter speed you need or required. I recommend about 100 plus, depending on what your ISO is and what kind of lighting you've got. And then, of course, how able are you to keep that scene still? Again, using a tripod or the magic beans to maintain stabilization all the way through all the different images. Based on what you're photographing, you may only be able to get about 100 for your shutter speed based on the lighting for that. So make sure that you designate between your series of photographs. I use my hand. So let me explain that. So I'm set up to photograph a Union Pacific locomotive. I'm going to take a picture of my hand to start. And then I'm going to start taking the series of photographs, focusing all the way through that photograph from one end to the other. When I am done with my photographs, I've got enough, I feel, through the depth of field, I take another picture of my hand. What that does is that allows me to designate between beginning and the end, because I may take two series of photographs of that same location. Or if I'm going to go to something else, it will be obvious that it's different. The hand just really helps you keep an eye on what's going on. There are online tutorials with Helicon Focus to help you work through all that. So with Helicon focusing, you tend to get some haloing around edges. It's more so in telephoto shots. You can eliminate this by, again, taking more frames, is what I found. The more frames, the better, to avoid the haloing. Adjusting the frames based on the areas to reduce the haloing. I'll give you an example here. So this is a photograph on Steve Priest's Santa Fe Railroad. If you look up toward the searchlight signals there on the cantilever, you can see there's kind of a little bit of a ring around them. This is part of that haloing. I didn't get enough frames between those signals and the buildings way behind, which is what caused that. Let's take a look at, here's one on Mike Borcon's railroad, an example of a S2 Alco switcher at the engine facility at Green River. It's kind of hard to tell the halo in here. You really can't see it, but if you zoom in, you can see just a little bit there on the roof line behind, with the station behind, and a little bit around the exhaust stack. Not too bad, not an issue at all. Again, incredible that you zoom out to the actual frame shot, it's really unnoticeable. Okay, if you're using a laptop computer to do Helicon focused, again, it's based on how powerful that is. I will tell you that I find that it drains the battery. So you want to make sure that you are you're plugged in, you're ready to go, because it will drain it fairly quickly. Let's take a second here, and I will give you an example of how Helicon works. Okay, so here is the basic Helicon program open, ready to go. I'm going to come up and I want to open images. Now, I've obviously got my images all set up for the presentation here. So I come up and I open my images. And I've got a demo. And again, as you can see, these are the photographs I took of this particular scene. I took numerous photographs. I took a lot of photographs because I want that depth of field to be all the way through. I want to avoid haloing on the smaller details within the subject. And you notice I've got my photograph of my hand either end. That tells me the beginning, that tells me the end. So I select these photographs. And I come down here and I open. And it'll take a second to open up. And there's the first image. Now, there's a variety of methods you can do to render. There's average, weighting average. There's a depth map. There's pyramid. You can find out more about that at the Helicon website. And I encourage you to use all of those and try different methods to find out what works best. It will depend on the number of images you've taken to get to this point. I generally use the weighted average, but I have used the depth map quite a lot as well. So what I do now is I click on render, and it will pop up. You'll get these two separate screens, and you will it'll start grinding through the process. Now again, how soon it completes this is also based on how uh, how powerful your computer is. I'm doing this on an Apple laptop, and while it's fairly powerful, it does what it does for me. It still takes a couple of minutes to grind through all these images and put them all together. And as you can see there on the right hand side, there is a bar, and as it goes through each image and brings them together, it scrolls down slowly as it does the process. The image on the left, I believe, is actually the image that we're looking at the time. The image on the right is actually the image that it's creating. That it's getting better and better depth of field as it goes through each individual image. If you're doing multiple images with Helicon Focus, in terms of multiple series of photographs, the different series will pop up down here on the lower left-hand side as you grind through this. Photograph is again on Mike Borcon's HO scale Union Pacific Railroad at Green River, Wyoming. We're looking at the Green River Depot, and this is a power that's just coming off of the service tracks. That's coming out to get on one of the many mail trains that operated through Green River during this time period. Mike models the 1950s during the steam diesel transition. And again, these locomotives at the time did not have any weathering on them. During the photo shoot or just prior to it, Mike got out his chalks and his brush and added a little more detail to these particular sets of E7s. You'll see the finished product and how well it does at bringing all these images together. And again, I started at the front. I started focusing on the ballast and the track ahead of the E unit, right in the bottom of the frame. And I focused all the way through, and I picked different points as I focused through. And I did not make large jumps in my focal point all the way through. I made sure that I hit key points, like obviously the nose of the locomotive, obviously the baggage cars behind it, and then the set of cars behind that, and the set of cars behind that, through the station, different points on the station, finally to the backdrop. You want to make sure that you hit all of those all the way through. How many images are you going to take? You may take 10, you may take 20, you may take 40 to get through that depth of field. You get through a telephoto scene with more depth in it, you're going to take a lot of images to get all the way through that and to avoid the haloing. We're just about done with this. Let you get a chance to see what this is like. And you can see the one on the right continues to get more and more in focus. And the one on the left, you can see it started from the back and worked its way forward. Now the image on the right is more in focus of the locomotive. Once you get done with these images, you want to save them. And it's a fairly easy process to save it. We're just about there, right about now. Okay, we're all done. We're at the bottom. You come up and you want to save it. Come over here to save. You name it and you save it. Now, one thing I want to show you just really quickly, look at the detail you can do and see with the little magnifier as part of the process. You can actually see the dirt, the dust on these locomotives. You can actually see the bricks on the top of the depot. Very, very neat program. Again, it's a subscription program. You'll have get inspired, tell a story. Clean the scene. Got to have it clean. light it up and experiment with that. Use the white balance. Use a fixed base, your magic beans for your Helicon focus. Questions?
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
we've got questions.
Okay.
Th- thanks, thanks,
I'm
Dan.
done.
A great presentation.
Thank you.
There's a lot of questions, so let's get to these right now. The first one, it's the old Ford or Chevy, Nikon or Canon, or do you've gone mirrorless?
I'm a Canon man. Been a Canon man for a lot of years.
Okay. Uh, Photoshop or Lightroom or both?
They're, you know what? It's like Canon and Nikon. They do the same exact things. They're different names. They're slightly different to work with. It's whatever is easiest for you to work with. You know, they again, both of them do the same thing. So work what's going to use what's easiest.
I guess it's whatever you're familiar with that you'll pick. What wattage of lighting would you likely use, and how would that relate to the f-stop you use?
For you. More questions?
Yeah, hello. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're having you're breaking up a bit. What wattage do you use for lights, and how does that relate to your f-stop?
They are a lot of feedback. I can avoid that. Bear with me. I don't know why. Is that working better? Is that working better now?
If you stop sharing your screen, might make a difference. I'm not sure.
Yeah, for some reason it seems like I share the screen and I don't get the feedback.
Okay, well then
So
let's
lighting.
share the screen and keep going. Yes.
Okay, lighting. I use Lowell Tata lights. Couple reasons why I do that is one is uh, you can pick them up used, fairly inexpensive, online, eBay kind of stuff. The bulbs, the bulbs you can get just about anywhere. You can get them at Home Depot. So they're just these elongated halogen bulbs. They are around the 3,500 Kelvin is what those are that I'm using when I'm traveling. Say I'm going to go to Salt Lake City to photograph some of the great railroads out there. I get out there and something happens to my lights. I want to be able to get those bulbs fairly easily, so I can just run by the Home Depot and get them. Again, they're fairly simple, so that's the other part I like about them. Easy to use and then easy to repair if I've got an issue with them.
And somebody asked about the light tinting you use, and I think that relates to the Kelvin scale. And you said you're probably down at the lower end of that.
I'm probably down at the lower end of that because I'm going to take those lights and I'm going to drop them down low to cache those shadows into the photography. Um, and again, I'm using um, I'm using my white balance and my filter to get that adjusted right so that I don't have the yellowish tinge that may come uh, for using those lights down that low.
Okay. Somebody else asking a question. How do you pick your shutter speed?
I do that based on what I'm photographing and the lighting I'm using in that particular location. I always want to try to keep it around 100 because of the risk of bumping the camera while I'm taking the photographs going through those series. But I have gone down as low as 30 or 40, um, again, based on the subject matter and the lighting in that particular location.
Question: LED lighting. Can that be used for what
Oh,
we're doing, or is it uh, there?
yes, you can use LED lighting. Right now, I've found that a lot of the LED lights, first off, you need a lot of light. And a lot of the LED lights are still fairly expensive right now. So as time goes on, as those kind of come down as they are, I'll start experimenting more with those. you can do that. A lot of the great LED lights nowadays, you're allowed to control a lot of the temperature and the intensity with them, which is again, it's a nice feature. It's a great feature. Something that I can't do with the lights I've got now. They also don't put out the heat, which is also great if you're in a basement in the middle of the summer trying to take some photographs. Again, I'm personally waiting for those prices to come down a little bit more um, to afford to get enough to be able to take the photographs. What I've found also right now is, and again, personal experience, a lot of the LEDs, um, you need a lot of them to do the same what I'm doing. They don't tend to cast as much of a light out.
Okay. What kind of lenses?
What kind of lenses? I tell you what, I've got a 24 to 70 on my Canon that I use all the time. I have got a larger telephoto that I have done some shots with, but I've really found that 24 to 70 covers everything. I've been able to do a lot of it's worked very, very well for me.
Okay. A question: when you're doing your stack shots, your manual focusing, how many? I guess it depends on the depth of the scene you want to catch. How many shots you're going to take, and then you're manually focusing every inch or 2 inches on the scene.
Correct, correct. So, for example, the scene we're looking at right now, the Frisco train on the bridge, Rick McClellan's beautiful railroad. I focused every, you know, every a couple of feet, based on the scale, obviously. I started focusing on that first bridge pillar on the bottom, and then I probably had 2 frames in between that bridge pillar and the first of the handrails on the bridge. I probably had 3 images focused there on just the nose of the locomotive. I'd focus on the coupler and the MU cables. I'd focus on the grab irons on the front, the nose. Then I would go to the windshield or the headlight, the air horn, and then work my way back along the locomotive. I don't remember specifically how many I shot for that one, but it was a lot. And you can't shoot too many because Helicon can smash them all together.
Okay, and I've got a question. Interest cell phones and cameras and cell phones. They've come a long, long way, and we've seen guys like Bob Fallowfield do a lot of photography on his railroad, for the lack of better terms, the Fallowfield effect, where he's getting his camera right in the scene. You, as a
Yeah.
professional photographer, uh, are we getting the point where a cell phone is getting to be a suitable tool for uh, layout photography?
You know, and again, this is my opinion, and I hope I don't come across as being a snob on this. When it comes to trying to photograph model railroads like the prototype, the Helicon focus and being able to step through all that and give me that depth of field all the way through, I think makes a difference. I think it makes a big difference. The cell phone photography is getting better and better every day, and I think it's absolutely awesome for snapshots. I think it's great to use it. Um, the problem that I find is the depth of field isn't quite where I'd like it to be. Understanding that even if I'm using my telephoto lens out on the prototype, that stuff way in the distance may not be as in focus as the nose of the locomotive I'm photographing, but it seems to be a little extreme when it comes to the cell phones. Um, not not badmouth them all. I just think that this takes it to the next level, um, as opposed to more of the snapshot type stuff that you can do with cell phones.
All right, so we're getting to a point where we may be there, but not quite there. But it's still sometimes a useful tool to have in your bag for shooting models. Okay, very good,
Exactly.
very good. Thanks a lot, Dan. A great presentation. We all enjoyed it. Some fabulous photographs, and thanks for taking time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. So we're going to take a break now and get ready for our round table, which is coming up.